Next, I want to introduce Jennifer Wadella. She's one of our awesome JavaScript developers at Bitovi, and she's going to give us the lowdown of how conference talks work and how to get yours accepted.
All right, so we're going to talk about conference speaking like a boss, and came up with this presentation for a couple different reasons. One, because Jason asked me to, and any chance to be a part of these awesome meetups, I'm like, hell yeah. But I feel like I hear a lot of the same concerns or complaints from people when they feel frustrated on how to get into conferences, and so that's kind of what I wanted to address in a lot of this. And I'm going to set a timer for myself because this is a lot of content to get through, so buckle up, y'all. So I would describe myself as a somewhat decent international and keynote speaker. Like, people keep asking me to show up. So I think that's a good sign. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at OMG@Sveti. But to get right into it, the first thing about conference speaking is to kind of understand how the games work and how conferences work and how conference acceptances work. Because that can really help give you some insight into why your abstract isn't being submitted. Like, if you're just firing off blind abstracts into the dark and never hearing back or never getting any feedback, that's not really helpful. So a couple terms to talk about. When we say CFP, that means call for papers or call for proposals. And so that's essentially your topic that you want to talk about, a brief paragraph kind of describing what the topic is, why it's relevant, what the audience will learn from coming to your talk. And these are the things that are submitted during a submission process. Conferences sometimes have their own submission processes. They might use a more utilitarian tool, which we'll talk about. But it's also important to understand the context of all the conferences going on. There are going to be two main kinds. We're going to have single track conferences, first of all, which are maybe they'll run for a day or two, but they only have one talk per time slot. So they don't have a bunch of different rooms running with different talks. They just have one talk after the other. And so these can be a lot harder to get into just because there's so many fewer slots available. These conferences can either be tech agnostic or tech specific. And so it's important to understand the context of the conference you're applying to. A tech specific conference is going to be looking for really deep dive talks into a topic. Like a React conference, for instance, would be very much interested in kind of what Adam was showing us about React hooks. That would be a great example. A more tech agnostic conference might be more open to introductory level talks on React or React workshops, that kind of thing, because they assume they're going to have a wider audience that may not be as familiar with all the different tools. And so you can kind of stay a bit more high level for those. The same concept goes for multi-track conferences. They can either be single tech focused or more tech agnostic, but they're going to be running multiple tracks at a time. So that means you might have one conference that has a DevOps track and a JavaScript track and a leadership track and an agile track. So depending on kind of what you're interested in submitting, those might up your chances of getting in just because they have so many more tracks to fill. On that note, a lot of times conferences will see abstracts from a speaker that they really, really like, but maybe that track is already really full, which is why you should always submit multiple abstracts across a couple different topics that you're interested in, because if a conference likes you and can't fit you into one track, they might try and fit you into another track if they have another abstract to submit from. On that note, when you're writing your abstracts, they get so many, like thousands and thousands of submissions. So to make their lives easier, they're going to chuck immediately any abstracts that don't make sense or don't meet requirements. So if you are just like word vomiting in an abstract and it isn't immediately clear what your talk is going to be about or what the audience is going to gain from your talk, your abstract is immediately going to get chucked out. You're never going to get any feedback about that. So it's important to understand that what you're putting in your abstract does matter. When we look at a typical selection process, I want to state that a lot of conferences are community run. And so that means these are volunteers taking time away from their families and their lives to review abstracts. And that might mean being shut in a room for 12 hours of a day just reading abstracts. I've only done this once for a conference, and I swear to God, after like the 8th TypeScript abstract, I was like, kill me now. So just be aware of kind of the selection process that they're going through. But let's say they have an abstract and this abstract is good, it's readable, they can understand what's going on. They're going to make sure that it meets requirements for the conference, whether that's fitting in a certain time slot or is written coherently. And then from there, they're going to make sure that that content seems relevant to their attendee interests. Conferences get a lot of feedback on what their attendees want to hear more or less of, and so they're definitely going to evaluate your abstract against what their audience is interested in, meaning you could have a very amazing, well-written, perfectly constructed introductory level abstract, but if attendees of that conference are saying, hey, we want more advanced level, that could hurt your chances of getting accepted. It has nothing to do with you or how good your work is. It's simply based on the attendee interest. And then from there, like in the case of having 8 to 20 different TypeScript abstracts, the conference organizers are going to look and say, okay, which abstract out of these are good, and then which speaker do we think is going to be the most capable of delivering this content in a great manner? So this is where, and having a web presence is going to matter. They want to see that you are a more experienced speaker, so they would feel better about choosing you over somebody else. That being said, if you are up against, you know, one of the creators of a language, or let's say you want to talk about Lodash and John David Dalton also submits to that conference to speak on Lodash, you're not going to be the speaker picked. And I'm sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. But it's really important to understand and know this in context. When we talk about actually getting on the circuit, kind of understanding how conferences work, this comes into how we actually write our abstracts. It's a good idea to choose topics that interest you because, you know, if you don't actually care about what you're talking about, you're not going to be very exciting to listen to. And it's important to know that you don't actually have to have your entire talk written before submitting an abstract. Sometimes it can be helpful to outline your talk to help craft that abstract better, but it's not required. In fact, I don't even write a talk until an abstract has been submitted, partially because I believe in jinxes and I'm weird with stuff like that. But start there. From there, when you're writing an abstract, here are some things to consider. You want to start with a topic you know. Really powerful abstracts start with problems, like what problem did you face, how did you solve it, and what gotchas did you run into? A lot of people are really keen to dive into tech specs, but real world experiences are really, really good and resonate more with audiences. They care about what happens after the deploy to production. So it's just good to be aware of what audiences are going to get out of your talk. And on that note, the most important thing you need to keep in mind is what will your audience gain from your talk? Ego can sometimes come into play in speaking, I think, and people get more interested in sharing their story than sharing tangible advice for the audience. So making sure to strike a balance between what you experience, but then how the audience can use that to be better at their jobs is really important to keep in mind and convey via your abstracts. Once you have some abstracts written, it's really important to get feedback from others. You might think you're being very clear or very transparent in what you're explaining, and it might not come across like that at all. And having, you know, different people review it would be really, really helpful. You can absolutely pass it out to coworkers or peers. If you know any conference organizers or other speakers in your circle, they can be really good for you too. And this is not just like a newbie piece of advice either. There is an abstract that I have been wanting to do since like last November, and I've sat down to write it at least a dozen times, and I just keep getting stuck. And so finally, I drafted some stuff out and I pushed it to a couple peers, and I was like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I'm not really liking the way that it's coming across. And they were able to help me kind of brain dump and get through. So having other people review is really, really powerful to creating abstracts that are very readable and understandable and enticing for conference committees. When you have your abstracts and your talks created, you can absolutely start small. Local meetups are a really great place to demo your talks, and they are always desperate for speakers. So you will be doing them a huge favor by offering your talk up. So definitely reach out to your local user groups. You can use meetup.com, reach out to their organizers. Schools are often a really good place to kind of test content. A lot of tech boot camps are coming up, and they'd be really interested in having you come speak to their audiences. So those are really good ways to kind of test your content. When we talk about actually submitting to conferences, finding CFPs can be really, really difficult if you don't know where to look. So we've got a couple big ones. One of them is papercall.io. And this is a place where you can create a speaker profile, create all your abstracts, and then you can actually go and see a list of different conferences that are available, and they have open CFPs. You can filter papercall by your interest, whether it's a certain technology. You can see whether they cover travel or not, all sorts of things. So that can be a really great tool. That being said, pay-per-call is not great on the other side for conference organizers. They don't have a really good system for reviewing abstracts when you're, you know, trying to sift through 1,000+ abstracts. And so a lot of conference organizers have actually moved to a website called sessionize.com. Sessionize does not have that directory feature. You can still create a profile and you can still save your talks in it, but you can't openly list for events. So it's just good to have your stuff updated in there. And then when you come across those links, just be aware that some of them might be using Sessionize. You can join a couple different communities like Toastmasters, or if you have a local Slack community you're a part of, there might be a speaker channel or something like that where you can find CFPs. If you're involved in something like Google Developer Expert Program or Microsoft MVPs, they also a lot of times will have channels where they're posting open CFPs. Twitter is also a really great resource. I love this list that Lady Elite has piled Tracy Lee for conferences that are a lot of really great places to submit to. And then CFP Land, Tech Daily CFP, most Tech CFPs, and CFP Exchange are also Twitter handles that all they do is retweet open CFPs. So it'd be a good idea to follow those just to kind of get some more organically curated content for yourself. I really do recommend tracking your submissions. A lot of people look at the conferences I do and they're like, oh my gosh, how do you get into so many conferences? It's because I apply to a shit ton of conferences. And so the only way I can track my progress is by tracking my submissions and understanding what's going on. This is how I do my spreadsheet tracking. This is a very minified version of it. I have what conference I'm speaking at, what date it is, because a lot of times their dates will collide, where it is in the world, if in case I'm trying to do 2 back-to-back, and whether I was accepted or not. And so this is how I can actually go and figure out my statistics. Like if you look at my statistics for 2018, I submitted to 58 conferences and I was accepted to 23 of them. So that's a 39% acceptance rate, which I think is pretty decent. So far this year, actually, I just got accepted to another one yesterday, but I'm not able to go to that one. My acceptance is at 52% and I've only submitted to 36 conferences. So it really is a numbers game. So if you want to up your speaking game, you have to put in the work of actually submitting. This is a little nugget that I've learned, that when you are submitting multiple abstracts, your least favorite talk is always the one that's going to be selected. So just be aware of that. That if you put in something that you're like meh about, that's totally going to be the one conference organizers pick. It's just a universal rule. One of the other really great ways to kind of up your CFP game is to volunteer at conferences. A lot of them are community driven and community run. And so they need a lot of help with check-in and everything like that. But this is a really great way to get face time with conference organizers, get them to know who you are, as well as get to interact with speakers and kind of understand a little bit more about how conferences work and how you can better curate your content to serve their audiences better. Asking for feedback is also huge. Some conferences have started offering feedback on why they did not select abstracts. And this can be really, really good if you didn't think your abstract was as clear, or if they didn't think your abstract was as clear as you thought it was, or a host of other reasons. That being said, not all conferences are going to be able to give feedback because it is a massive amount of emotional labor. So if they offer it, great, but if they don't harass them, because then you'll never get accepted ever. And on that note, it's really important to be gracious. I just see so much ego in the speaking community, and I don't think they realize the damage it does to themselves. Especially if you were upset about your talk being rejected, conference organizers will absolutely remember how you handle rejection, and you'll probably get yourself on a nice little blacklist. On the other hand, I've seen people who've been rejected from CFPs before and have been really kind, and they're like, hey, didn't make it in, really good goal for next year. And they handled it really well. And then a speaker at that conference dropped out, and who do you think they asked first to fill that speaker's spot? So be gracious, be humble, and that'll do a lot for you. Okay, so you've got your abstracts written. You really want to up your game. You want to be a speaker that conferences want to have. How do we make that happen? First of all, you have to establish a web presence, because you know it's not true unless it's on Facebook, right? But seriously, if you want to stand out from the crowd, they need to know that you're a real person, a person capable of generating and delivering good content. So a couple of my tips: absolutely have a personal website. And I tell all my speaking mentees to have a page to list their speaking experiences. A lot of conferences will ask for past speaking experiences, and so you can link them to that page. For now, you can put on anything from speaking on a panel to speaking to a classroom, anything like that, but just show that you have been up in front of a crowd before, and they don't have to be worried about taking a chance on you getting in front of an audience and just like having a mess. It's also really important to have a good bio that's written in the third person. And I know it feels weird and it's super awkward to write, but definitely spend the time to do that. It can be really helpful to kind of draft a bio and then send it to your friends and coworkers, because they're going to view you in a different light and might recognize awesomeness in yourself that you don't even realize is cool. And on that note, get a really good headshot. A lot of conferences or networking events will actually book photographers to offer them, so that can be a really great opportunity. But if worse comes to worse, find a friend with an iPhone 8 or a Pixel 3. Pixel 3s also have really good night mode, so I'm like known for harassing my friends if I want good photos at night. Hey, Matt, bring me your Pixel 3. In addition with your website, a really good way to explore potential topics is by actually blogging about them. It can kind of help you get your ideas out. But again, if a conference organizer is looking at you as a speaker and they see that you've already blogged on a topic, you're obviously competent enough to have put together some thoughts, and so that can help secure your place. It's a good idea to be on Twitter, be engaging, Twitter seems to be a huge platform for conference communications, especially with attendees trying to get a hold of you. The only thing is, don't be a douche canoe. Like, nothing really gets deleted from the internet. If you're an asshole on Twitter, people will notice. And then in addition to your blog content, feel free to start to push those articles and content out to other places like YouTube, Twitch, Pluralsight, or Egghead. This can help you grow your web presence and kind of get some of that content out. If you're a lady or a non-binary individual, I've got a link here to the Fempire list of speakers, which is a curated list on GitHub. So conferences that are looking to bring more diverse talent into their conference speaking can look through that list of speakers. So that's another thing you can do to boost your standing. Be a speaker that conferences want to invite back. And this is a really big one. It's really important to engage with the community and to participate in the hallway track, which is kind of what happens outside of the actual sessions. Don't be that speaker that just holds up in the speaker lounge and never gets involved with the community. The organizers want speakers who are going to be engaging with their community, who are fun to be around and aren't elitist snobs. Nobody likes elitist snobs anyway. And then the organizers also spend a lot of time putting on really great social events and dinners and things. So try and attend those, try and attend the keynotes. It really helps create the conference community and make it really open and welcoming. And that's important if you want to be a repeat ask speaker. When you are speaking, be prepared. A couple things to make sure you have are always your power cord. I bring 2 display adapters because like I'm a type A control freak and I really don't want anything to go wrong, and presenting from somebody else's laptop is the worst. I always have a water bottle, and then if you are a clicker kind of person, mine never leaves my backpack, so I always have it with me. I like to thank the conference organizers and sponsors in my slides and my presentation, and let the attendees know it's due to their efforts that we're able to have awesome events. Community organizers really go unsung, and so if you really want to stand out, make sure you thank and put the praise on them for putting together such amazing events that help all of us learn and grow as a community. One of the other things conferences sometimes offer is a feedback rating system. So I always make a point to ask the organizers what that feedback rating system is. Sometimes they'll have an app, sometimes it'll be on a website, sometimes they'll have cards that you put in a bin at the outside. But you can really get feedback for yourself by reminding the attendees how to do this. And often conferences will use those feedback systems to invite speakers again. And you want good feedback, and you can't get good feedback if you don't have any feedback. So figure out how to make that happen. Be prepared to post a link to your slides and your notes, and also on Twitter. A lot of times attendees will want to look for that. I always have mine in a link, and I tell people to take a picture of that last slide so they have access to it. I've got a couple further resources for y'all that are kind of speaker starting kits, and then just more good in-depth content about how to write an abstract. And so these are from some good speakers and some good conferences that have put together a lot of great thoughts. So those links are available in my slide. I do mentor, I said do. I'm trying to get that out of my vocabulary, but it's harder than you think. I am available for mentoring and abstract reviews, especially for women or people of color. So if that's something you're interested in and want to get starting, that's my calendar link for mentoring there.